if you take into account the misleading about the Red Cross, the misleading about the ability and the willingness of the Human Rights Commission to monitor the situation, and if you take into account the denial of the existence of the 2006 report and then blacking out of the substantial portions of it, that is, sir, the making of a massive, colossal, systematic cover-up. And you stand accused, along with the Prime Minister and the Minister of External Affairs, of perpetrating a fraud on Canadians and on the House of Commons by concealing all of this information from Canadians and not being honest with them.
I know when you're in opposition, you think of cover-ups or conspiracies and all these things, but as you know, because you were in government, it doesn't actually happen that way. I don't know anything about the handling of the report out of Foreign Affairs, but typically, as you know, in ATI, there's an ATI system in every department, and there's somebody responsible to go and get the information. There are lawyers in every department to determine what gets severed and what doesn't, and I can only assume that that process was followed in Foreign Affairs, but there's no conspiracy out there. As I said, we have an agreement with the Afghan government, we have an agreement with the human rights, and we expect them to live by their agreements. And that's why a number of our officials are involved now with the Afghan government and the Human Rights Commission to confirm, for instance, recent allegations, which are media allegations. What's the validity of these allegations? And if there is validity, what corrective actions will be taking? So that's going on. But in addition to that, within the last few days, we have basically have made an arrangement with the government in the Kandahar province so that we can have access to our detainees. So henceforth, our military, but it can be anybody, can have access to our detainees. But what we want is we want these agreements enforced. We want the Afghan government to live by their word. We want the Human Rights Commission to live by their word. And contrary to what it says in the newspaper about the Afghan Human Rights Commission, our people have been in constant contact with the Human Rights Commission. And they have asked them if there's any problems, if they need any help. They said they had, in effect, some minor problems that they would deal with themselves. They have never asked for our help. We are going back at them again in the last day or two to confirm the facts that have been put in the media, to find out if there's any truth to what they're saying, because we have a different story.
Well, now, the Minister of Defense said our military can have access to our detainees. But the Chief of Defense Staff, not aware of the so-called agreement, said that's not our area of expertise. It wouldn't be soldiers who would monitor the detainee situation. So who's right? The minister or the general? And if there is an agreement, why won't the Prime Minister show it to Canadians right now?
The Right Honourable the Prime Minister. Order.
Mr. Speaker, once again I suggested to the Leader of the Opposition that he have the facts before making allegations against the Canadian military. Truth of the matter, Mr. Speaker, is we have consulted with the government of Afghanistan over the past several days. We have found no evidence there is any access blocked to the prisons. In fact, Mr. Speaker, not only are Afghan authorities agreeing to access to the prison, they actually agree that they will formalize that agreement so there is no potential misunderstanding. Mr. Speaker, these allegations were made recklessly, they were made without information, and the Leader of the Opposition should apologize to the Canadian military.
My question to the Prime Minister is, does he still have confidence in his Minister of National Defense?
What I don't have confidence in is the Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, we will conclude a formal agreement so that we never again face these kinds of baseless accusations. The fact of the matter is this, Mr. Speaker, the real problem is the willingness of the Leader of the Liberal Party and his colleagues to believe, to repeat, and to exaggerate any charge against the Canadian military as they fight these fanatics and killers that are called the Taliban. It is a disgrace, Mr. Speaker.
Exactly.
The Defence Minister said yesterday that they'd reached an access agreement with the government in Kandahar province. Then he released a statement saying the arrangement was actually with the NDS, an intelligence police accused of torture in the Foreign Affairs report released last week. Now we have two conflicting stories, plus an improvised arrangement with an outfit known to practice the torture we're trying to prevent. Mr. Speaker, I know the Prime Minister hates to admit when he's wrong, but this farce has gone on long enough.
I said this government would take the time to get the facts. Public Security has consulted with their counterparts in the Afghan prison system. National Defence has done similarly. The Department of Foreign Affairs has been in touch with the Afghan government and other Afghan agencies. And I gather today the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission held a press conference in Kabul to correct the record on some of these matters. The only person wrong is the deputy leader when he made allegations that we could not get access and nobody could get access to prisons in Afghanistan. That's false, and rather than repeat it, he should withdraw it.
Yesterday, the Minister of Defence said there was an agreement. There was no agreement. He misled Canadians. Crystal clear, after having said for ages that we didn't need one. Now the Prime Minister is saying we don't have one now, we've had access all along, and we're going to get an agreement anyway. Have we used the access? Have we used it? Have we fulfilled our responsibilities? And when's he going to fire?
Mr. Speaker, they're always intent wanting to hear false allegations, but when it comes to hearing the truth, they try and shout it down. I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that for a considerable period of time now, our own corrections service here in Canada has had corrections officers working in Kandahar. Matter of fact, I talked with one of them 2 days ago, Mr. Speaker, 15 times already. She has had access to the prison facility in Kandahar, has full access. Wow. Also did a visit yesterday to the detention facility. Improvements are being made. It's difficult. It's moving, but it's difficult. But improvements are being made, Mr. Speaker.
Why was this information, these so-called facts, not brought up in this House before? What is going on here? Are we seeing fabrication on the fly? Are we seeing serious policy making? Are we seeing responsible government? The fact is no. We're seeing day by day a patchwork quilt of inventions and fabrications.
I said repeatedly to the leader of the NDP and others in the House this week that the facts that the allegations they were making did not accord with the facts as we understood them. I undertook that we would consult over the next few days to see what the facts are. I can tell them that this allegation that there is no access to the Afghan prisons turns out to be completely false, and I understand the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission has denied other things today about that were reported about them. The question, Mr. Speaker, is why the leader of the NDP doesn't simply withdraw the allegation rather than continuing to bash the mission and the Canadian military.
So who is doing it? And is the Prime Minister able to guarantee that these detainees are indeed considered according to the Geneva Conventions?
The Right Honourable the Prime Minister.
I'll spell it out for the Leader of the Opposition. For 4 years, in spite of repeated reports about these kinds of concerns in Afghanistan, the previous Liberal government had no policy on detainees whatsoever. In the dying days of that administration, an agreement was signed. We have since improved that agreement, and we're working with the Afghan Independent Human Rights Commission on that agreement. We have subsequently received additional information and willingness from the Afghan authorities to open any prison to any branch of the Canadian government through a formal agreement. We will pursue such a formal agreement, and I wish the Leader of the Opposition, rather than continuing to justify the accusation, would just withdraw it.
I had a chance this afternoon at the Provincial Reconstruction Team and a little bit here at Kandahar Airfield to talk to a variety of soldiers. And let me just come out and say very frankly here, I met a variety of soldiers who are pissed off. They're angry that these allegations have detracted from the overall mission here, the focus back in Canada specifically on the enormous amount of good that's being done, on the incredible things that are happening here in Kandahar province and around the rest of Afghanistan, and the additional security and the stability and the hope for a future that we are bringing to millions of Afghans. So I met some soldiers this afternoon who, in their opinion, are pissed off because the focus has moved and based on issues that are being addressed, and that was their opinion.
Are you, sir, quote, pissed off yourself?
No, I didn't say that. I said some soldiers explained that very carefully to me. I never get pissed off. We have business to do. You heard what my focus is as looking after Canada's sons and daughters as they do the job here, and that's what I remain focused on. I would also tell you that part of my discussion with the Governor of Kandahar this afternoon was him articulating his frustrations to me at allegations being made here about his country, about his government being accepted as straight fact back in Canada.
Mr. Speaker, this is disgusting. We support the troops. Everybody in this House support the troops.
Absolument.